A very good morning to everybody. I'm Sagar Kurade, Managing Director of Suman Food Consultants, here to give you a perspective with regard to food processing industry. I'm giving this perspective on Indian food processing industry for Food Tech event taking place from August 24th to 28th, 2021. So a little bit about us. Suman Project Consultants is India's oldest and the leading consulting company in India within the food processing space. So we have done more than 600 plus projects in India and abroad in all areas of food processing sector. And we have the fortune of having some of the who's who of the food world as our clients, whether it's a Fortune 100 company or Government of India or small and medium enterprises or international organizations like World Bank and Asian Development Banks also. To start the presentation, it's important to understand where India stands in terms of its agri-commodity base. As you know, food processing sector is one of the lowest hanging fruits of the Indian economy, and if India has to progress further, then it has to go up in terms of value addition opportunities then comes about from its agrarian base. India has a huge agrarian base. Almost 2/3 of the Indian population is directly or indirectly dependent still today on agriculture. When it comes to agriculture, we are ranked the number one in many commodities as far as world ranking is concerned. So if you look at bananas, we have about 40+% share of the world. If you look at millets, we have about 35.6% share. If you look at okra, about 70. Apricots about 24.4. There are a multitude of agriculture commodities where India is the number one producer in the world. Even with regard to number two, even if we are not number one, we are number two producers in the world for many agriculture commodities such as garlic at 4.6 or lentils at 22.5 or rice and paddy at 21.4. I mean, there's a huge base on agrarian base on which value addition opportunities can be taking place for India, and India can truly become the food bowl for the rest of the world. Well, India in itself is a big country, so you have to understand that what is applicable and viable in one part of India may not be applicable and viable in another part of India. So, for example, if you are looking to put a food processing plant, say in Jammu Kashmir, the good opportunities would be with regard to apples, walnuts, and so forth. But if you're looking at a food processing plant in Gujarat, that's not where apples and walnuts are produced, but it's a very good place for garlic, onion, mangoes, vegetables, and so forth. So each state of our country has an advantage which it holds in terms of certain commodities. And it is very important that when an entrepreneur is looking to put a food processing plant, there is a practicality to the plant being placed in that particular state. So one has to keep it in mind. I'll give you an example. For example, there are more than 400 plus mango varieties all across the world and also in India. But the key varieties that are processable, and when I say processable, which means all varieties are processable, but where there is a viability factor coming out from input and output, as well as the market demand aspects of it, you have primarily three varieties. You have Alfonso, Totapuri, and Kesar. Now, if you're looking to put a plant with regard to that, you will be looking at Maharashtra, Gujarat, or some of the southern states like Karnataka and Andhra, and so forth. So, when putting a food processing plant, one has to understand the strength of each state with regard to that particular commodity. It's very important to understand that India is still has a huge agrarian base, and yet Indian agriculture is not oriented towards processing, which implies that in many countries we see that the agriculture commodities or horticulture commodities are grown for processing it further. While in India, many of the agriculture and horticulture commodities are being grown for tabletop consumption primarily, which is why in many of the commodities we have a low processing level as compared to the rest of the world. For example, if in US fruits and vegetable processing is about 65%, Philippines is 78, and China 23rd. In India, it's about 2.5% associated with it. Same thing goes with poultry processing and milk processing. Although milk processing we are high at 35%, but still in developed countries the processing is at much higher level associated with it. So so it's an opportunity area also, which implies that India has not fully exploited its value addition opportunity when it comes to food processing sector, and there is still a huge gap which is there with regard to taking agriculture and horticulture base and taking value addition opportunities further and putting a food processing. Well, one has to understand that if you're looking to put where does the Indian food processing industry currently stand. So Indian food processing industry, I'm happy to say, has been growing and vibrant for that. It's currently at US dollar 375 billion, which implies about 14% of the complete Indian GDP. If you take 285 trillion, $2.85 trillion as an economy. What are driving factors are one, we have a population which is leading to strong domestic demand. That population, the middle class population is significant, which leads to a lot of disposable income. And there is a changing lifestyle and food habits that are happening. We have seen in recent Corona times how people have been ordering from home. So India is changing, and also the customers' expectations and food habits are also changing. Then we have a rising export opportunity. So the Indian exports are growing, and so are imports, by the way. And Indian export spike is primarily due to the demand in emerging economies and emerging neighboring countries that are there. We have a lot of supply side advantage. As I mentioned, we are number one and number two in many agriculture commodities across the world. And we have, importantly, a policy support from Government of India, where Government of India has come about and with several policies to support the food processing industry. And we will be talking about some of them as we go forward in our presentation. When you look at the food processing sector, as I mentioned, India's current contribution to a food processing sector to the complete GDP is about 14%, which is significant for the country. We have an ecosystem in food processing sector where we are processing fruits and vegetables, we are processing milk, we are processing meat and poultry. In fact, in buffalo meat, we are world's largest exporter associated with it. We have a thriving marine sector. Last year, pre-corona at least, India exported about $7 billion of seafood. We have grain processing related products, and as well as consumer products, whether it is in packaged, aerated, soft drink, and other forms associated. So we have a very vibrant ecosystem for food processing, where we are catering to almost all areas and sectors of process. I have mentioned this before. When it comes to the current processing level, we have milk that is getting processed at 35% of the total availability, meat at 21%, marine products at 8%, poultry at 6%, and fruits and vegetables at 2.5%. However, we have a good organized and unorganized sector mix, of which majority of the sector is in unorganized side, but India is moving from organized to unorganized to organized sector of it. And importantly, if we look at all the states with regard to food processing, we find that most of the industries are located in states like Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Punjab, Maharashtra, Uttar Pradesh, Karnataka, and West Bengal. So it's pretty well spread across, and these are some of the highly populous states also, where the population is significant and also thriving as far as food processing industries. I mentioned about infrastructure support. So what food processing industry has is food parks. So we have about 175 food parks across, of which about 40 to 45 are mega food parks, and they are spread across the country. And the government of India supports food processing industry in case anybody decides to put a food processing plant in one of those food parks. Those food parks do have common infrastructure, whether it's storage infrastructure, whether it's quality testing infrastructure, whether it's common infrastructure from the point of view of utilities. So one can take advantage of the food park infrastructure and put their food processing plant in that specific infrastructure anywhere across the country. However, we do find that there are a lot of waste also happening in food processing sector. So in fruit and vegetable processing, we find that 18% of the total production that is coming through is getting wasted, and that percentage goes from 6% for pulses and cereals to 5% for fish to 3.7% for poultry. Now this is from a farm to the tabletop production or even to the processing sector. I'm not even taking into account at this particular point of time the waste is getting generated when the product is getting processed. So that also is a huge opportunity where entrepreneurs can look at value from waste associated. For example, I took a mango example. So there are opportunities where mango, once it is pulped, you can take the seed and value add it further in terms of butter or any other particular product. So that's important to understand that India does have value from waste opportunities also. And as far as cold storage infrastructure is concerned, that has significantly gone up, and it's a well spread cold storage infrastructure, but it has its issues, which I will be talking. So the states marked in green have an adequate cold storage infrastructure. The states marked in yellow are states which have some cold storage infrastructure, but there's also opportunity for more. And the states marked in red require more cold storage infrastructure. As I mentioned, the cold storage infrastructure, which is critical for success of any food processing industry, currently has about 13.8 million tons capacity. Of the 6,800 odd cold storage facilities that are there across the country, 35% are below 1,000 metric tons. And that too, 65% of India's cold storage infrastructure is concentrated in two states, which is Uttar Pradesh as well as West Bengal. So one has to understand that there is a good number, but that number is also skewed. So we need to have an even distribution that is happening over the next few years. Over the last 8 years itself, we have been able to create about 12 million metric tons of cold storage infrastructure, which is significant. And this sector is expected to grow at about 15 odd percent in terms of growth. One can look at using the existing cold storage infrastructure as well as look to put cold storage infrastructure in certain opportune areas when one is looking at India. In terms of cold chain intervention, if you look at, as I mentioned, you have to be specific from a state-wise perspective, and it cannot be a straight line for the entire country. For example, if I'm looking at a CA storage from an apple point of view, I would be looking at Himachal Pradesh or Arunachal Pradesh or Jammu Kashmir as some of the states where I can look at CA storage for apple. And say if I'm looking for fish and fish related processing, my ideal states can be Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, Gujarat, West Bengal, Odisha. These are the states again spread across and especially around the coastal belt of India. But those would be the opportune areas associated. So just a perspective with regard to where one can look at intervention from a point of view of cold storage as well as from a point of view of processing. We do have to understand that for any food processing sector to succeed, its R&D capabilities, its infrastructure is very, very important. We have almost 130 plus FSSAI, that's Food Safety and Standard Authority, authorized labs that are there, where you can get products tested, confirmed with regard to quality testing parameters and acceptable parameters from a point of view of consumption. And if you see, my purpose of showing the chart on your right hand side is while India is exporting and those exports are growing, if you look at the percentage of exports, that's significant when it comes to neighboring regions, when it comes to South Asia or Middle East or East Asia. But when it comes to developed countries such as Western Europe, US, Canada, Australia, rest of the world also, that percentage contribution of total Indian export is less. So India still is yet to be a dominant player in a world which is much more quality conscious, and for that India is working on its R&D capabilities. India is working to put labs across India so that one can have the advantage of exporting quality products as per expectations of not only the neighboring region but also the rest of the world, especially the developed world. We mentioned with regard to government intervention, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how the food processing in India is supported through various government incentives. So if you see, India had a system, and in some states it's still there, but there were a number of clearances and approvals that were required and are in some states still required, where one has to go to different departments to take an approval in order to put a food processing plant. I'm happy to share that many states have worked on this and have now created a single window clearance system where an entrepreneur can go to the promotion board department of that particular state, and through a single window system help in getting clearances for all of them. There are some states which are still lacking with regard to this, but those states, if they want to see additional growth in terms of food processing industry, will have to work on a single window clearing system sooner or later. So we have what Government of India has introduced as Prime Minister's Kisan Sampada Yojana, where this is a link because food processing industry is a very farmer-centric industry where it has to deal directly with farmers, it has to deal directly with harvested commodities and so forth. So it is a thrust area of Government of India as well as almost all states within within the country. So it has an incentive whereby it gives up to 5 crores in terms of subsidy to any company and enterprise looking to set up within the food processing sector. These companies need to be either in an agri-processing cluster or within a food park. And what it does is it gives 50%, 35% of the technical infrastructure if the company is located in general areas, but in specific areas such as northeast, eastern states and hilly states like Jammu Kashmir or Himachal, then eligible project cost would be 50%. Cap would be at 5 crores, but the eligible project cost would be at 50%. So that's a capital subsidy that Government of India gives to enterprises looking to set up food processing plants in the country. The Government of India also supports if you are looking to set up a cold chain related infrastructure. So let's assume you are looking to put let's say a milk or a dairy processing plant which requires a cold chain infrastructure, or let's say you want to put something related to seafood. So here also Government of India gives 35% of the project cost support up to 10 crores in general areas and 50% of the project cost support up to 10 crores again in specific areas such as northeast of India or Himalayan states that are there. It's very important to understand that there is a support policy to ensure that food processing sector, being a thrust area, is supported well and thrives in this country. Government of India also gives support for anybody looking to put food testing labs in India. So while you have state and central government organization where the grant in aid for food testing lab is completely entirely free and 25% of the technical infrastructure is supported, when it comes to private sector or implementing agencies or universities, the grant in aid is about 50% of the lab equipments and 25% of the cost of technical work that will be there. This is as far as general areas is concerned, and if it comes to specific or difficult areas, the grant in aid is 70% instead of 50 for lab equipments and 33% of the technical civil infrastructure instead of 25. So one has to keep in mind that there is an opportunity for food testing labs also to be coming up in India. While they're already existing, there's still opportunity area for many. Well, in terms of income tax benefits, because this is important for many of the companies looking to put their food processing plant, the food processing industry has about 100% tax exemption for the first 5 years, and the next 5 years about 30% of the applicable tax is exempt. So one has to keep that in effect. So it's almost a 10-year policy that Government of India has for food processing sector. It also has deduction from a capital expenditure point of view when it comes to setting up of cold chain facility or sugar warehouse facility or for honey or for deductions from profit which are allowed for processing, packaging, preservation of many of the food products. So one has to keep in mind, and then there is investment subsidy which I have already mentioned. With regard to you, in some states there are, because land is something that comes from a point of view of a state policy or a stamp duty exemptions. has come, we have many states that are giving stamp duty exemptions or power related exemptions to food processing industry in India. Government of India also provides a support to anybody looking to put infrastructure for mega food park, where you put common infrastructure for food processing plants, and you allow those and invite those companies to put their food processing plants in those mega food parks. So if you're looking to put a mega food park, Government of India is giving you up to 50 crores in terms of capital subsidy. Again, there are project cost implications with regard to the extent of that, but 50 crores is a significant amount for encouraging somebody to put a mega food park in India. Let's look at it from a point of view of having seen that what are the existing support system and infrastructure like, and let's look at where India stands with regard to trade of food products. Let's first look at the entire value chain that comes about from a food processing industry. So we have a food industry which is supported through inputs, that is pre-harvest level. Then from harvest level, which is production related to it, there is a support infrastructure which then goes to procurement and storage, processing, and then retail. So we have processing industry which is thriving. Retail is both at organized and unorganized levels sector, and we have a huge procurement opportunities that are there, and we have identified some of the companies which you can see who are playing a major role in this country with regard to each of those segments associated. So India, when it comes to non-marine related exports, that's about $21.5 billion of export India does. On top of it, you can add $7 billion of marine exports also that India does. And in terms of total export, if you look at of agri and related exports, that's about $30 billion of exports that India does. However, the exports, as I said, are majorly in some of the items that we have mentioned on our screen, whether it's buffalo meat, rice-related exports, groundnuts, wheat, maize, cereals, and so forth. And I truly believe that there is an opportunity for many products to be coming up here, especially when it comes to processed fruits and vegetables, especially when it comes to ready-to-eat food products, ready-to-eat frozen food products, snack food sector, beverage related initiatives. There are so many products that can be coming up where India can be a dominant player, where it exports its food products to the rest of the world. We have tried to show where some of those exports are happening, and I look forward to the day where majority share is also held by developed nations in our total export market. When we look at Indian imports, as you know, India is a major importer of edible oil. So we recently have, day before yesterday, our Honorable Prime Minister announced an 11,000 crore support with regard to palm oil being grown, palm trees being grown, palm oil being processed, and so forth. But it's a fact that as of yet, edible oil is a major import food items, and so are pulses. So while India is a major producer of pulses in the world, the problem is also that we are the major consumers also. Hence, we have almost a 5.9 million metric tons of a gap where food is getting imported into India. And over the years, we have seen that while exports are more or less steady, the imports of food products in India are rising. This has got to do with aspirational aspects of the Indian consumer, but it's also got to do that India is a thriving food market in itself. So, a lot of the world is also looking at India as a consumer base. So let's look at some of the key trends that are emerging within the food processing sector, which one has to be aware of. So we have a changing consumer base where Indian consumers are expecting themselves to be treated at par with the rest of the world. We have a young population that is emerging where they are expecting some of the best products consumed like the rest of the world does, and therefore there is a change in consumer habits and expectations. With that, you therefore also find a lot of international companies that have set up their processing plants and base within India. I must say that Indian government does have Make in India initiative where they encourage companies setting up their shop in terms of offices or plants, food processing plants within India, thereby making it a win-win situation for both the entrepreneurs and companies as well as for India. We also find that there is a well-spread Indian diaspora across the world, and there is a rising demand for Indian food, Indian packaged food products now also in the rest of the world. So not only do you have restaurants that are there that have that you find in different parts of the world which serve Indian food, but also on their shelves, retail shelves, you will find Indian food products today. And the demand with regard to fruits and vegetables is continuing to grow, and which farmers are also producing more and more in terms of horticultural crops. You also find that the Indian food sector, the consumers are expecting now healthier products. This is another trend that is emerging where we have a population which is expecting, which is becoming more and more health conscious and therefore expecting more healthier options. So a lot of companies are therefore trying to put products which are healthier alternative to their existing products, or you have an entire new sector that is emerging, say for example, plant-based meat sector where or mock meat sector, which is also emerging, where you see that there is a consciousness to the environment in which and the ecosystem in which we are all living in. Packaging, by the way, has been another important major influencer. Indian government does have a packaging and labeling regulations within which we operate, and all manufacturers are supposed to label their products in accordance to those guidelines. But it is an important message where packaging a product in an attractive way is creating a certain demand, and packaging helps in a carry ability of that particular product. And importantly, the shift of trend is now from what processing companies and producers can make to what consumers are expecting. So consumers are expecting more in terms of quality, and we do have, by the way, a price conscious segment, consumer segment in India, and yet we have products which are of all, which cater to all categories of lifestyle. So one has to ensure that depending upon what market base you want to cater to, whether it's a middle class population, whether it's an urban population or a rural population, one has to make the products or pack them in accordance. We have an ecosystem now where we find that the frozen processed foods are growing more and more. The cold chain system in India has become better, and we do have a lot more frozen food products on the retail shelf than what we had even 5 years back or 6 years back. Our snack food sector is also growing extremely well. Corona was a very good example where many domestic companies saw the snack food sector demand grow, and there were good issues to deal with, which was demand related issues where companies had to deal with. And importantly, the trend is also towards product innovation, where consumers are looking for innovative products, and processors and entrepreneurs are looking to come with more and more innovative products. Some of those products, as I mentioned, can be value from waste opportunities or new trends, as I mentioned, towards mock meat sector also. That's all happening in India at this particular point of time. Strengthening the procurement is very important, and government is encouraging food industry to also directly procure from farmers, thereby benefiting the farmers also in terms of a better price, and in also encouraging the food processing industry from a point of view of getting removing the middlemen associated with the entire value chain and getting a better pricing for them also. There are some laws that have been recently introduced which will encourage this direct farmer processor connect even better. With that, I like to sincerely thank you. In case of any questions with regard to food processing industry or aspects to our presentation, I'm more than happy to guide anybody who's interested in setting up a food processing plant or entering the food processing sector within India. My email and contact details are given below, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much for the opportunity provided. Appreciate it.